So it's also a learning experience for us. We hope to get some feedback at the end, how you think we fared. And then I think we can go on, Zeran.
Let's start. Can you tell us a little more about the ladder of self-organization, Jordan?
Sure, let me do that. Um, what we encounter a lot is, for the past 2 years, I think the topic of self-organization became a much more hot topic. Lots of companies are jumping on the train, how they did 5 years ago with the agile or digital strategy train. And the more companies hear about it, the more companies think, we need this magic too. Please, what can I do to be future-proof with my company? So lots of C-level directors, leaders, founders are talking about this topic. What we found out through the work we do is a lot of them mean totally different things. They don't all, there's not a regular definition for self-organization. There's lots of facets to it. Is autonomy the same thing? Is it part of it? Is it on top or below, if you would nest it? Derived from literature, other sources, and interactions with leaders trying to help their company forward, came up with this model. What we see in the bottom is self-executing. This is what a Scrum team, for example, would be doing. So instead of a manager assigning tasks and telling them what to do and how to do it, the team has much more autonomy to decide that for themselves. What kind of tools or platforms do they use? How do they get the goals or the results that the business, that the company is achieving? So they get the trust and they have the knowledge to be able to self-execute their work. Mind you, there are multiple steps in this level also at a smaller level. And this can encompass from zombie Scrum, we just do the stuff, up to full Scrum, how it's supposed to be. Both of them can be in this range, but it's really about people having more ownership about their work. That means this is purely operational. If you look at it from a strategic, from a company level, you give people the power, the autonomy to make operational choices in how to get something done. Then if we go to the next level on the left side, we step up. Again, there's smaller steps in between. We step up to self-selecting. And self-selecting, if we try to explain the concept, is much more about people having the autonomy to decide which team do I want to join, in which team do my skills get to best use, in which team can I add most value to the company and the purpose I love. But if we go higher into self-selecting, it could also mean, is a team responsible, or do they have a large influence on their hiring and their firing? Can they just hire someone new? Do you also have a say in if someone is not really gelling with the team? Are you allowed to do something about it? Doesn't mean you have the full autonomy. There's still some legal and other things that need to be done. But are you even involved in that process? The fact that it's on this level means it's not purely operational, but people also get some tactical sense by having certain expertises, go to certain parts of the company. You can put more heavy weight on a new product you're exploring, or on a core product that needs something else. And as you see, these teams are zoom-ins. So if we go to the third sport of the ladder, we're up in self-designing. And self-designing is really about having the people get enough insights in the organization that they're actually allowed to co-create said organization. And that means people who actually do the work get to say something about how that work is organized. So what kind of teams do we want to form? How do those teams interact? How many teams do we need for a certain product? How big should those teams in itself be? And this is really where the co-creation comes in. So involving people already in the design process, instead of still having management, consultants, knowledgeable people, or even product owners say, these are the products, these are the teams. Now we give people the autonomy to see to which thing they want to contribute. Both of them are definitely a step up from how a lot of corporate organizations are run nowadays, but they have different implications, different steps in between. That means if you get to say about the size of the teams, the amount of the teams, you're already steering the company as a group, but you're already steering the company in a more strategic way. Where are we going? Which markets might we focus on? Do we want to explore some new domains, or do we want maybe let go of old products or products which are not as successful as we hoped? And then if we look at the top of the ladder, as far as we can oversee it now, this is what we have called self-directing. And this is really where people have all the trust, the autonomy, but also financial resources or other resources they need to start a new product in a company, to adhere to a new market, to do experiments, to do pivots. You have so much trust in that people believe in the same purpose that you think, instead of me as a leader, us as the management team deciding this, let the people decide who are closest to the customers, closest to the markets. Doesn't mean there's no rules or it's lawless. It just means people have enough insights, oversight, and backing to be able to do this. Mind you, there's not that many companies that have climbed the full ladder, but that's also the beauty, I think, of a ladder. If I have a ladder, it's just as useful if I want to put up a painting and I just climb it halfway, as it is when I need to do something on the roof and I climb the ladder full way. A ladder has no judgment in at which level you stop. A ladder is just there to support you. And also an important trait of a ladder is I can start at the top of the ladder. I really need to go through all the lower levels of the ladder to be able to reach the top. But it's not a goal to reach the top. The next video is one a self-organization. It's a whole self-organization trajectory. This one was self-designing. So we had about 2 months of co-creation up front. Then we had a full day with close to 200 people who were self-selecting into which chapter, so which knowledge group, which community would I like to join, where I hope I can better help the company, better fulfill my own purpose or career wishes. And take it away, Zirjan.
And this is where it's going to be an experiment. Let's see how the video works out once we share it in Zoom. I'm going to optimize the share for a full screen video clip. And start the video.
Wat gaan we vandaag doen?
Vandaag hebben we Tribe Selectiedag van KPN TV.
Nou, we gaan de chapters vandaag zeg maar, laten vormen door de mensen zelf.
Ongeveer een jaar geleden zijn we begonnen met de transformatie naar Agile. En we gaan nu beginnen met de afronding daarvan door te starten met de chapter-indeling.
Deze Agile transformatie is gekozen voor een indeling volgens het Spotify Engineering Culture. Dat betekent dat we uitgaan van 1 tribe met meerdere squads, dus teams waarin het resultaat geleverd wordt. Iedereen die in een squad zit, zit ook in een vakontwikkelingsgroep, een chapter.
We hebben gekozen voor een dag waarin we zelfselectie gebruiken. Waarin de mensen zichzelf gaan indelen in teams voor het ontwikkelen van hun vakmanschap.
De zelfselectie, het ging bijna vanzelf. We liepen ook steeds voor, zeg maar, in de family waar ik zat. En de chaptercoach was al bepaald toen het chapter bepaald was. Echt gewoon super gaaf.
De dag is eigenlijk opgedeeld in een aantal rondes, waarin in de eerste ronde eigenlijk geïnformeerd wordt, waarbij het leiderschapsteam inzicht geeft in welke chapters er zijn.
Wat we dus willen doen is mensen eigenlijk zelf laten kiezen waar kan ik nou het meeste groeien en leren. Met gave dingen bezig zijn waar ze echt energie van krijgen en intrinsiek gemotiveerd zijn. En dat gaan ze vanzelf weer teruggeven in de leverkant van de organisatie, de squads.
Co-creëren met de mensen, dus input vragen van hoe kijk jij tegen chapters aan, wat zie je voor je en de gesprekken erover aangaan.
Dus iedereen wist vrij goed waar die in thuis wil horen. En dat is heel erg leuk.
Dus het is heel squadoverstijgend. En dat we in ieder geval een doel voor ogen hebben om nog beter te worden in ons vak.
Ik moet eerlijk zeggen van dat er beter en heldere chapters uit zijn gekomen dan dat ik van tevoren had gedacht. En met name ook om de energie die ik zie en de passie die ik zie bij de mensen die echt in de chapters nu zitten. Ze hebben bewust ervoor gekozen.
Zelfselectie is gewoon, doe het. Heb vertrouwen in je mensen. Bereid het voor, maar laat het vooral los. Mensen zijn super intelligent, weten wat ze kunnen en wat ze willen. Echt, vertrouw in de mensen. Ze weten het beste.
What is wonderful about the last guy who spoke in the video, who said, "Trust in people. They know best." It's wonderful. In the morning of that of the day, he walked up to me, semi freaking out. "Jordan, my Scrum Masters are walking away. They don't want to be Scrum Masters anymore. What should I do?" So I shrugged my shoulders. I said, "Oh, wonderful. That saves you some hard conversations." And I turned around to help facilitate in another corner. And he was there like, and after lunch, he came back. He was like, "I hate you for being right, but I see what you mean." Because these people talked with their feet, the law of 2 feet. They said, at the beginning of the transformation, I was asked to be a Scrum Master. I was willing to do it for the company, but I don't like it as much as my other job or the other skills I have. Or maybe I feel, oh, having been in the role for some time, it's not what I hoped or expected. And indeed, having a bit of reflection on it, all the Scrum Masters who talked with their feet and went back to be more engineering type or back to some other parts of the company, he felt, yeah, all of these people were on my mental list. I should check in with them and see if they really love their job and how they're doing. So it was a wonderful way to get these kind of things to the surface. What's also interesting is how people perceive these things. So already in the morning, the director of the whole tribe, he kicked it off. We've been co-creating for 2 months, so there's quite some time for people to integrate this whole process of what we're doing. And in that, after the director kicked it off, pitched today, set the stage, as soon as he stepped off to let the info market start, one of the people walks up to him and says, "So where should I go?" And he's like, "Well, you can decide for yourself." And I was luckily within ear distance, so I overheard the conversation. And the guy kind of froze. He was like, I never thought about this." And a few minutes later, I find him outside, calling home, explaining his wife what was happening and if she could help him choose. And it was a wonderful moment to observe how in that moment he actually realized, holy shit, I can actually make this choice. And in the past 25 years I'm with the company, I was never challenged to think in this perspective as much as I am today. So these are some examples of what this does to your culture, what this does with people, their perception of how they're seen as grown-ups. Then for the next video, Zerian, can you give a short introduction what people will watch here?
Yeah, the funny thing is when we looked at the previous video, there was a self-organization and self-selection of around 200 people. You might say, okay, well, that's awesome. Let's do that. But we have also examples of smaller teams, and this is actually a team within Unive.
is a customer in the Netherlands. They had a really big CRM team, and they decided, well, we need to split up. And in the beginning, management was telling, all right, so we have 2 teams, and we already have decided who goes where. Zerian, can you make sure this transition goes smooth? Of course, I can make sure, but not like you did. We need to co-create this, and we need to allow them to self-select which team they go to. And this is actually after movie of the self-selection day itself. Yeah, so let me share that again.
Mind the volume.
I will mind the volume. Let's see if I can change that very soon. Yes. Yeah, so a funny thing here is that the manager later on came to me and said, well, Zerian, this is the first thing that we have ever tried this. And it made it even more special because around 70% of the team members were external hires. So it was for them really, really nice to see that even, it sounds strange, but even external hires really care about the organization and want to create teams that benefit the organization as well. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. Let's jump over to the questions. Few questions came in. Feel free to post more if they came up. I think there's not that many. There's not that many, so we can address them. You just mentioned there are levels inside self-executing. Sorry?
One second. Monique, can you mute your microphone? I think it's unmuted on accident.
I think it was Juan.
It was Juan. Okay.
I muted it and it, yeah.
Okay.
Question from Daniel. You just mentioned there are levels inside self-executing, for example. Did you also map them out or name them somehow? It's on our to-do. Not sure if it will make the backlog. So no, is the short answer. We didn't yet. I think that's an interesting exercise. And I'm also pretty sure they're not all equal. So there might be like 4 sub-steps in one and there might be 6 in the other. So that is quite, the smaller steps in there are not equal across the whole board. A question from Joost. Is there an optimal team size when teams are self-executing? I would really stick to what, for example, the Scrum framework says. The Scrum framework talks about 5 to 9. And I would say that's for a starting point. And that mainly has to do with the communication lines. So if you make a bigger team, it will probably be multiple teams under the same flag in the way how they interact, how they create things. If you are much further in the journey, if teams are more programming, for example, then you see they really tend to be on the lower end of teams, and there's definitely successful teams of 4 people in there, but that's not a point I would start at. Question from Daniel: How does this relate? How does this relate to this whole teal thing, in your opinion? The whole teal movement, if you can call it like that, There's definitely some overlap, but I would say this is more an aspect of that. As Teal has three core things going on: self-organization, wholeness, and evolutionary purpose. The evolutionary purpose is touched in here if you're able to climb the ladder all the way to the higher part. But it's not what we focus on for now. We focus much more on evolutionary structure, which is just below that. The self-organization is, I hope, obviously enough in here. For wholeness, the topic of wholeness is much more broader than is in here. But being able to express yourself also in what you want to achieve in life, what you would like to do, how you would like to grow, is definitely related and adds to feeling whole at work. But for wholeness, there's much more to explore than just self-organization, I would say. And that way you also see how in Teal these things are kind of overlapping. There's some overlap in these three concepts. Good luck with the call, Stuart. Danielle, what was that co-creation process up front? We'll get to that in a later part of the presentation. So I hope you can have some patience with us. Is there a study that says 4.5 people is the optimal size? That's a very specific number. So I think, yes, there is a multiple. I think it was 4.2 actually, but they're Googleable. What do you want to say, Zerian?
That's actually a statement, not a question. So.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Still, we need to cut one person in half.
Yeah. That's definitely the optimal team size. Optimal also means that the team is already close or in high performing. So that often says a lot about the rest of the organizational structure, the organizational culture. And as I shortly touched on before, as soon as you're further in these kind of journeys with your company, the team sizes really tends to get smaller. All right, Zerion, let's continue.
Yeah. So that you've heard a little about our experience, about what we have done, and we first started out with, we should do something with the knowledge that we have, because we were speaking at conferences, speaking with colleagues about self-organization, about self-selection, and we noticed that we are repeating ourselves. And that's something that's, for both Jordan and I, is not a very good thing, because once we repeat ourselves, we're not learning anything new. So what we wanted to do is basically share our knowledge with the rest of the world on how you would do a self-organization. And we started out with a brilliant idea to write a book. And we started making the chapters and pinning post-its. And then 1 year passed by, and we thought, oh, what have we done? Oh, nothing yet. Okay, let's start over again. So we started over again, and while we were writing chapters of the book, we realized, hey, it's so funny, because what we are writing now is much different, a lot different than how we used to do it, how we used to do the self-organization. So we figured the knowledge that we have now is getting old as we speak. And is continuously learning, is that something that's really, is that really us? Is that Jordan? Is that Zerian? And we both decided, no, it's not. So we made a pivot, and we decided to create a platform, selforgchefs.com, and all the content which we decided would be useful in a book is going to be on a platform, and allowing people to add content to the platform as well. And we also recognize that, a platform is really good. We want to share our knowledge, but there are still people who prefer books, like this one, for example. You want to read, so we also want to have the opportunity to write a book, but make it really interactive, that if you scan the book, for example, with your mobile, that it highlights, hey, there's new content about this subject, go to the website. And so that felt a little more like Jordan and Zirian. Okay, this is something we want to share, and the data will never get old because it's continuously updated on this. So we don't need a first version, second version, third version, 10th version of a book. You can just always go to the platform. So that's something that we did, and in the next periods, or the remaining time, we are going to talk about the chapters of the book and explain it a little with you on how you would do the co-creation process by itself. And so that, and again, there's room for Q&A. And until now, I can tell you that we are running perfectly on time. So that's really good.
I'm surprised. This is not how I know us.
I'm surprised as well. But that's maybe because there's lack of interactions, and that keeps us focused. So again, post your questions in the chat, and we will discuss them later on. Yeah. So if we talk about the book, if we talk about the platform, with all the knowledge that we have and experience, we found a pattern that is actually three big parts of self-organization. So you have to do a really good preparation. That's actually the starters. You have the main course, that's the day itself. Those are the videos that you saw. And most importantly, there's also a dessert. Because if you go to a restaurant, you want the full meal, right? So that's something that you really need to take care of, because after the self-selection day itself, really important to take the rest as well. So how do we do things? And what we are going to do now is explain which topics are there within each course. So we have the course of starters, course of main courses, and desserts. Yeah. And Jordan, can you take us to the first course, the starters?
Of course, of course. So the starters is what you do up front. If your company, if your culture is new to self-organization, what do you do to make sure that people have enough insight to make decisions they've never done before? That people feel enough trust or involvement to make sure that they believe in what's actually helping. And what you see here are some of the patterns that we uncovered. This is what we continuously see in these experiments. We've been putting some other experiments that people shared online next to it, and yeah, we see a pretty good overlap. So there's also something we're considering for the platform or the book to interview other people who've run experiments like this and see what's the overlap. Do you recognize this pattern? Do you have something to add? So that feedback is still taking in. What you also see is some of them have a blue line underneath, and that are some of the aspects that we feel are mandatory. So it starts with having a sense of urgency. If there's no need to change, it's not that easy to have people be eager for change at all, right? Then there's also the purpose. So besides why do we need to go somewhere, you also need to know where do we actually want to go. So what would be the purpose of starting experiments, starting a journey like this? Then optional is the co-creation design. So that's much more about having a design team. Do you actually involve people? Because you can also do self-selection without co-creation, where it's still product owners or management deciding, this is what the new company look like, or decide to not change the structure of the company, but let people be more fluid in which teams they reside in. Level the playing field is really about if you're going to do new things. If people need to be educated about new concepts like autonomy or being T-shaped, or if people need to be educated in new domains you're exploring, like becoming a much more data-driven company or doing more things in the cloud. Then what we would like to call the boxes is the organizational design. So what will it look like? I put it on mandatory, even if your organization will not transition, transform to something new. Creating clarity on what is there is still a mandatory part to do. Then the blocks. The blocks are much more about which kind of blocks would fit in those boxes. We think it's a wonderful addition if you do it, and it also puts people first. So touching on that wholeness again, what does your profile look like? What are your wishes? What are your strengths? Or what do you want to learn? Visualizing something like that makes it possible to also steer self-organization experiments in that direction. What we call the main course. So that's actually the day in which people will decide where to, or the event in which people will decide where to go. That needs some kind of design. It can be quite minimal, but it has a flow, it has an order of things. So you need to put some mind into that. And then there's the dessert design. That's much more the aftercare. So after the event, how do we support these new teams to be successful? How do we mentor these people who might be in new roles? What do we do with backlogs or the work that was in a department that is now scattered over teams? Supporting these kind of things are in desserts, but that's not necessary. You can also say if it's a really small thing, as the second video we saw, where the same people are still before and after in the same teams, they might have the overview already and do this themselves without much thinking up front. So much for the starters. Some things I want to highlight is, for one, the design team. And the design team is really about how do we make the things we want to co-create accessible for people. I haven't seen something like this succeed where the one who was previously in charge of this just steps away and says, okay, now it's yours. I wish you all the luck and I trust you. That's not empowering. That's not leadership. So there needs to be some design. Doesn't mean that the leaders or management or even coaches have to do it. So this design team, our preference would be, is a diverse team with people from all corners and layers, if your company has that, who are in there. Again, if we look at team size, keep it concise enough to keep the communication flexible and flowing. And what they actually do is they facilitate the co-creation process. So what you see here on the left, for example, is a poster which is much more about educating. So what does T-shape mean? It means you're broadening and becoming more multidisciplinary, and it means you're deepening in your core skill. That are both sides of the T. You do one in your team. There you become broader because you work in close collaboration in a multidisciplinary team. That is, you work in close collaboration with other skills. In your chapter, there you work with peers who have the same knowledge, who can challenge you on that, where you can inspire each other. If you look on the right side, there you see another flip. So you see them also numbered. So there's flip 3 on the side, 5 and 6 on the left. This was for the bigger reorganization we saw on the first video. In total, there were 10 of these flips. Physically, they were up there. People could walk around. On the top, you see a small explainer. What do you see here? What kind of feedback can you give? And here you see one which already received a lot of feedback. And the goal of the design team, or one of the tasks of the design team, is to integrate this feedback. So in most of the things we did, every Friday, the design team would look at the feedback, integrate it, make a new iteration, and then the week thereafter, people could come back again, look at it, and give feedback again. You can also do more active sessions where you invite people to a more guided tour of all the information. So that's also a choice that you make in the design. Do we do passive collaboration? Do we do active collaboration? And what does active mean? Do we have open sessions where we invite the whole group, tribe, company? Or do we have active sessions where we really go one-on-one with all the existing teams or departments? Enough about the design team for now. Let's go to the next one. The boxes, I shortly mentioned it, your organizational design. The organizational design is set in something where we would like to have the metaphor of boxes and blocks. like children playing with them, where the star only goes into the star-shaped thing, and the round thing only goes into the round-shaped thing. What you do with boxes is actually saying, all right, in this team, we need 2 people with a square profile, 1 person with a round profile, and 2 person with a plus profile, for example, where the round, the square, the plus are metaphors for developers, testers, etc. But this is if you do it on a role or function level. There's also other ways to split this around, and Kaushu asked the question about this. This is really up to what do you find important in the culture you want to grow to, in the company you want to become. What you see, for example, on the left, this is much more skill-based. So what do you want to learn? And that would be the main differentiator on how you go there. If you look at the middle one, there we made a combination of what kind of roles would we need in here and what kind of tasks would people need. So for roles, there's a front-end developer in there and a back-end developer. If you look at the tasks, we have test automation in there, but the team doesn't care if the developer or the tester or the software as a service engineer has them. For the team, doesn't really matter. We need this skill on board, and whoever brings the skill, totally fine with us. So there's multiple ways to do this. And if you look on the right, there's another way to design a box. This one talks much more about diversity. So the legend is not here, but for example, for chapters, one of the requirements, one of the boundaries was people need to come from diverse teams. So not a team fully joins the same chapter. They would have to split up to be able to make that cross-pollination throughout the organization. Zerian, do we do a Q&A now quickly? I think that's handiest, right?
Yeah, looking at time, because we still have the blocks and the video. I think we can skip the video, but we can do a few questions now as well.
All right, first do the blocks and then go to the questions. Yeah, good one, good one. So talking about the round shapes, the square shapes, the triangle shapes, blocks can be on different angles also. On the left side, you see them for chapters, for knowledge sharing. So for example, the top one, which is not that visible, I see now, was for the product owners. And it's in Dutch, but it says there's a peer review block in the top middle where others would not vote if they would see you as a junior, a media, or one of the people that really drives the group knowledge forward on the knowledge perspective. There's on the top right, what do I want to learn? What's the core skill? So we had a session with them first to design this framework. What are the core skill topics of the product owner? They came up with, from top of my mind, 11 topics. And then everybody could build their profile out of these 11 topics. So they would say, this is my top 3 skills, and this is the main thing I want to learn. And that way, we ran a self-organization process. If you look on the right, you see it's much more chapter-based, but to build the squads, to build the teams. So you see it's a fractal. So you see really big code engineering and Java/backend. So that's the core expertise of this profile. The next to it, you see, this person also knows something about continuous delivery, and this person has somewhat knowledge about data engineering. And that way, combining these kind of profiles give you an overview, what would be the main thing in this team. And as you said, Serian, I think the video is not needed at this point of time. On the other hand, it's 1 minute.
Nah.
No, all right, perfect. Then let's dive into the questions. Have you ever run a self-selection event online? No, I coached people doing it. I wasn't in the lead for that yet. But let's check in afterwards because I do have some ideas or pointers on what you should look into. But I think it compasses more than answering it here in 2 sentences. How do you figure out what kind of boxes and blocks you need and how many? So here we really go back to having clarity about the goals, about the purpose of the company. That is really your starting point. So one is this had a sense of urgency that was in there. Can you go back to the starters menu, Zerian?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So it's really the sense of urgency. What are we afraid that might happen if we do nothing? And having that purpose really clear. Where do we want to go? And it's not something you can answer in general. Some is already what is our core? What kind of knowledge do we have on board? There might be a lot of need in the world for something now, but if your company never hired for that, is not equipped to do that, it might not be a good idea to pivot your purpose to that. So it's already, of course, start where you are. It's part the market, and an important part of putting people in the driver's seats would also be what would people feel. A funny example I once heard is if people were able to self-organize, McDonald's would have stopped with plastic straws 5 years ago. Just because people would be able to shape the company into, okay, I don't think this is good practice, we should stop this. They would invest in reinventing the straw, in doing it in a much more intelligent way. So it might be a small, silly example, but this is also, yeah, you give something back to the people, so the people will, that means I think some of the things that are happening in society will then much more than now also happen in your company, and be more mindful, more whole as a company with the world, I think, in that sense.
Yeah. And
yes, please add.
And that's also exactly why the co-creation process is there, just to involve the people and allowing them to express their opinion as well. And the more opinion you receive, the more you can really think about, okay, how does this influence the purpose and the sense of urgency, and then you create the boxes and maybe the blocks together.
Yeah. One interesting perspective there to share is I think there's 2 big starting points. One of them is with the purpose and the product, and then I would definitely start with the boxes, with the organization design. The other one, if you really believe in something like the Liberty Developmental Organizations or Peter Senge, the Learning Organization, the starting point could also be blocks. What do our people love? How can we support our people the most in their journey, in their development? And we believe they joined this company because they have a somewhat comparable purpose. So putting our full investment in believing in the people will bring us to some wonderful purpose. So starting with the blocks and saying we believe in people, we invest everything we can in that, and that will lead to purpose, profits, etc. Or starting with an inspiring purpose, with sensible products, and from there people will organize into the parts they believe in themselves then. So there's no set starting points for me. Okay. Then over to Zerion.
Yes, let's talk about the main course. That's actually the main event, the main event of the self-selection, of all the hard work that we have done in the co-creation process. This is a day where things happen. And looking back at which steps are there actually to really make sure it's a successful event. It can be a 2-hour event, it can be a full day event, it can be a week event, but at least it's an event. And one of the most important things you should do is setting the stage. Although if you have been in the co-creation process, you might assume that everybody knows how it works, how we have done. That's an assumption that we would really suggest to validate on the day itself. And also to get people aware. There might be a little info sharing, a little about, okay, so what are we talking about? Gain some extra knowledge, for example, to make the rest of the event successful. You have the self-selection starting round. That's mandatory. So you need to have at least one round of self-selection. And then you could have extra rounds. If on the first time you don't have the desired outcome, then you can have extra rounds. And of course, you have self-selection closing round. That's also an important one. Quick off can be part of it. Quick off can be something like, all right, so we have designed a new teams. How do we start? What are our agreements? When are we coming together? What are our phone numbers, for example, or email addresses? Things we want to share, and closing the event. Closing the event, that's also a very important one. If you ask me, food should be there all the time. You cannot have closing the event without food. But at least that's something that you invest in it together and close the event together. And if we dig deeper in setting the stage is basically an introduction to make sure that everybody understands and aligns with the desired outcome. I cannot stress that out often enough. And if you see who should be the one to do that, usually the highest stakeholder involved. That can be a manager, that can be the CEO, but at least the highest stakeholder involved. And why you should do that is to make sure that you have the focus of the day. Although you have had the co-creation process in itself where people could ask questions, new questions will arise. People will talk to each other, and you want them to have the focus on it. Here you see a few examples of, this is, for example, the product owner of the two teams who does the setting the stage. Okay, this is why we are here. This is why we needed to change. Basically, the sense of urgency, the purpose, how we came here, and what outcome do we want to achieve. Just a brief summary of all of it. And this is Jordan, for example, in this case, and this is a Scrum Master who does the introduction, setting the stage. So that one is really, really important. And another aspect that we want to address is basically the self-selection round and a reflection. Because what you usually see is maybe you have done the co-creation process in such a way that within one round, everybody is pleased and you have the desired outcome, or at least you have the teams which can have the desired outcome. Usually in complex domain, and that's where we are in these agile domains, product delivery is complex. It's a complex environment, and we need to have more, we need to have more rounds. And usually if we look at it, is that we have a review round. So you have the first selection where people choose where they want to be, and some of them are not quite sure where they want to be. So what they do is have a challenge by team members, or have a challenge by other things as well. Yeah. So, and if you look at this example, this is round one. Round one, we said to everybody, all right, just make sure this was a blind vote, by the way, just only looking at the skills. The names that you see here were blocked. So only looking at the skills, create two teams which can help us deliver the value of the product backlog. So they chosen, and once we decided, once we revealed, he said, I'm not sure about it. All right, what is missing? Yeah, in this team, there's a lot of seniority, and in this team, a lot of juniors. They have just started, so it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel, although we have the skills, but it doesn't feel right. All right, so we have a second round, and the second round was basically having here all the skills and how much seniority and there is within a team. And actually, they swapped a few team members just to make sure that you have balanced teams in there. So that's what I want to say is important about if you do the self-selection event itself. Make sure you really think about, is it going to be one round or multiple rounds as well. Yeah.
May I add to the example? What we did for one of the experiments that was actually about chapters is totally switch it around in between. So people would self-select, oh, which chapter would I like to join? Then we built in a reflection round by actually saying, oh, now go back to your product team, to your squad, and share your topics, your selection with them, and get feedback from your team. And then we did another self-selection round where people were able to, based on the input they got from the team, the people who work together with them a lot, who know them quite well, oh, maybe I should consider this. Oh, let's still take a look there. Oh, I never thought about this, but my team had said that this might also be fitting to how they see me contribute value to the team. So you can deliberately design it in a process like this. You can also design it by data, counting how many to-do we have. Is it equally distributed? Yeah, please continue with the questions, Sharon.
Let me unmute myself. Jordan, can you answer the questions? There's people ringing on the doorbell.
All right, then let me answer the questions. I hope for setting the stage, some more examples were given. Else, please specify the question if you need something more there. Well, the how many rounds you need, I hope it was addressed just now. And this is a hard one. What could happen is that at the end of the event, you find out, we're not there yet. Let's book another slot tomorrow, next week to continue if it's really a big thing you're trying to solve. It could also be that you reserve the time for another round in the schedule. In general, I would say it was better to have more shorter rounds than one bigger round. So think more in the line of a round of just 10, 15 minutes. Then have people step back again, look at the overview. Is it balanced? Is there some way, somewhere where we need to optimize things, and then step back in again, instead of trying to oversee the whole thing while you're in it. So having a skipping around in the end and finishing the event earlier has never led to disappointed people in my experience. So rather book an extra round and not use it than have a round short and having to recollect everyone afterwards, because especially if you go to 3-digit amount of people, that's a horrible thing to arrange. Do you want to take the questions again, now you're back, Serian?
Yeah.
We are with Daniel Hummel. How do you include social aspects in the selection? And how do you make sure that not just the old networks go together?
Yeah, that's a very very good one. Is one of the ways that we have done it before is to mask the name. If you mask the name, then you can really judge on the skills that you need, or anything else that you need, and then you unhide them. So that's one aspect of it. Really important one.
Maybe I'll also share something about Belbin or MBTI.
Yeah, we've also done some self-selection where we said, all right, if we want teams, Dr. Belbin has had some studies about the optimal roles within a team. So we decided to incorporate that in team selection as well, the self-selection event. So that's also a part of making sure that old boys network don't join each other, but you can make it really transparent on the skills they have, the roles they have, the personalities they have, and that's where the boxes and the blocks come in.
And a cool or interesting addition, I should say. We thought it was a wonderful way to look also at, or it was an experiment, but we included in the chapter self-selection. So all the Scrum Masters did the Belbin test, got their profiles featured on their blogs. And then we found out during self-selection, it was hardly used because people did not integrate the meaning of it yet. it was introduced just a few weeks before. People were like, oh, this is an interesting model. But as soon as the complexity kicked in and they had to oversee how the teams were balanced, they just look at the skill sets or the core focus of the Scrum Master instead of, oh, so this person could add this to the team where we share knowledge. It was too hard to oversee something that they hadn't integrated yet. So that's also, if you introduce something new, don't do it just before this event, because it will just get washed away in the complexity.
Yeah. The last question by Stuart: how do you make sure that the skills used here are the right ones, or Granity or Zoom level? Well, that's something which is part of the co-creation process itself, because what we did at Unive, or actually also at other customers, is we did some workshops on revealing which skills the team already has, and also revealing, looking at the product backlog, which skills do we need, and that was basically the starting point. And there have been some discussions, and there will be some discussions about, okay, are we talking about too much details, or should we just say developer or a tester, or should we say, no, we have Java and we have .NET developer and we have backend? That's something that in a co-creation process you will notice how deep you have to be.
Yeah, I think that's the best answer. Letting the people decide what granularity they need. And something we also added in multiple of these experiments was get peer feedback. So if you say you're a web service developer, that's wonderful. But then let your peers rate if you're a junior, a medium, and a senior in that. So are you starting out and need some help with things? Are you on your own, or are you actually are others going to you for help? So then having a peer review on your profile is a wonderful way to make sure that these kind of more fine-grained things are included. Zeyan, last question before we continue.
Beer, there's no last question, I think.
Well,
oh,
Daniel
no,
asked,
yeah,
does
Daniel.
it make sense to have rounds that focus on different aspects, skills, Belvin roles, MBTI types, beer preference?
Yeah, actually we experiment with that as well. And what we noticed is that they are really interconnected, because when they decided, okay, based on the skills, yeah, okay, we have the perfect match, and then we add another ingredient to it. All right, now look at your personality. Oh, now it's all messed up. We actually have to go back and see revisit the skills again. So it can work out, but for us, we noticed that it took a lot longer in the process. And to be honest, we would really advise not to do a lot of mix a lot of things in it, because it makes it only more difficult to really choose the right things. In the experiment of Belbin, we did it with Scrum Masters chapter and with the infrastructure team, which also split into two teams. But with other teams, we didn't do it, because it was really complex for them to really understand what the Belbin roles are all about. And then we decided, okay, first we're going to select based on the skills, and we inform the Scrum Masters, and we educate the Scrum Masters to take that aspect a few weeks later.
Yeah. And in general, I would say please experiment and update us on how it works for you, and maybe we'll broaden our horizon, our perspective on this. I remember I helped for multiple departments prepare self-organization, and they wanted to have it all. So they said, yes, we're going to do the profiles. We love the profiles. We want the personality types on there. We want people, the skill sets on there. We want their domain knowledge on there. And I stopped them before they added a fourth and a fifth component to it with, if you do this, it won't be much use. Because for me, domain knowledge is important. And I'll go into the discussion from that perspective. For someone else, the skill is super duper important. And continuously, all the discussions will go past each other because you can't really choose as a company. What do you find most important for where you want to go? Please make that decision. Maybe add one other element to make it multidimensional. But as soon as you mention 3 elements, please go back to start. You will not receive any money. This is not how you win the game of self-organization.
Yeah, there was actually a self-organization event that I hosted, which we had like 13 blocks, so 13 aspects, and basically what those aspects would be left little room for self-organization, little room for self-selection, because they were all so tied up that there was no room left anymore.
All right, I said less questions, so let's jump over to desserts. This one can be pretty small, depending on what you put in there. But in general here, I would say none of them are mandatory. Teams are able, if they're pretty close to the work they did before, if the people in there are enough to get the new purpose or the new products built and done. You might not need it at all. But the phases or the aspects we uncovered in here is immediately after the start. What would teams need the next week? It might be a new team room, for example. Where do we actually sit together? It might be logistical stuff like, oh, we're using the software that shall not be named, where you put in all the Jira tickets. Do we get our own space in there? Do we get admin rights? These kind of things. How do you get them running in the first week? Then there's, of course, continuous support, more in the longer run. All right, so if you want to grow to a more data-driven company, we might have some vacancies in teams for big data experts or for a data marketeer. We've never done it before, so there are vacancies. If we're serious about this, we should fill them up. So there they might need support for these kind of things. And that is actually a proper way to enter self-selection with vacancies. You have an aspiration, you're trying to fulfill that. It doesn't mean you need to be there today. Having open spots, which you are aware should be filled, is a proper ending point at that point in time, as long as you make sure to pick it up afterwards. And the rounding up is much more about what have we learned as an organization? How happy are we? So this can either be evaluating, learning for the next time, and every time maybe broadening the boundaries and give more trust and co-creation to the people. It might also be make an after video, share it for recruitment, let people see what kind of awesome company you are. So these kind of elements could be in there.
And one important thing which Alice is
maybe an example.
Thank you, Alice.
All right, bye-bye. Maybe a short example where it went wrong. It was still, I think, a wonderful journey for the company. But the first video we showed with 200 people self-designing the new company, there were a dozen somewhat people were not able to make that day. We had a follow-up event the week after, which we were too busy up front to design. So it was a kind of, oh, quick thing. Oh, we need to do something with those people. Oh, let's do it next week. But a few odd months later, there were still 3-4 people who hadn't joined a chapter yet. And it was because management, the chapter leads, was too busy trying to manage all the new chapters, and they were somehow just overlooked because we didn't include this step in the plan up front. We didn't design a proper aftercare. So what do we do with the people that are not there? What do we do with the people that cannot make the second event that we make? So they were just kind of left over. And at some point, one of them rang the bell. Yeah, all these other people have a chapter and I don't. And what can I do about it? And oh my God, these people were kind of forgotten. They were lost at the airport, so to speak.
Yeah, and another example is about the follow-up is doing some retrospective. because the whole self-selection and self-organization is also an experiment, because we want to create agility within the organization. So it's also a thing that's usually overlooked, and I've done it as well, is to have a follow-up or retrospective round within 3 months or within a half year. Just see, okay, how are things going now? Can we achieve the goals that we have decided before?
Yeah, wonderful addition. So once the dust has settled, did we actually achieve the bigger purpose we had set for ourselves? Was this whole thing useful? Are there still some small cracks or squeaks in the system that we should optimize again and have maybe a smaller local rerun of the event? All of these things could be options, but if you don't measure or look for them, you won't find out.
Yeah. Right. So we have time for some general, for some other Q&A questions, if there are any.
When will the book be ready?
Oh my God, not the book question.
That's a trick question. That's a trick question.
Yeah. For those who listened carefully, it will never be ready. At some point, it will hopefully be good enough.
Yeah. And to provide a little more transparency about the progress that we have done. What we have done now is basically we have worked out the starters and the main course as good enough for now. Also create them on the website, or at least the main course is on the website. We still need to write the dessert, and we need to put the content of the starters on the website.
The new starters. We had a previous version of the model or framework. I'm not even sure if framework is the right name. Maybe a good question in the chat. What would you call something like this? It's a framework, I think, because it's a frame and it helps you do stuff. But framework has a connotation, and I'm not sure if it's the right connotation. But we call it framework for now. We had a previous version that I shared at a conference in Germany. We got some feedback on it, and we felt it was valid feedback, so we reworked the starters. So the version that's on the website is an old one, but we'll update it in the coming year or 5. No, we'll update it before Q4. We'll update it in the third quarter.
If you are familiar with MBTI personality types, both Jordan and I have a favor of ENFP, and that means we love to do a lot of things, and focus is not one of them. So that we have come this far is a big achievement for both of us. Right?
It's not indexed yet, Stuart, because we felt the content was not ready yet. And I'll put the website in the chat now.
Yeah. And if you visit it, you will receive the registration. So from tomorrow on, we will change it back to the original, how it was.
So your offer, is it just about, publishing the stuff, writing the book, or are you consulting, mentoring, and that kind of stuff for people?
Both.
We find it important to make it accessible for everyone. I think it's also reasonable to say not everyone might have the facilitation, the coaching, the experience to guide such a process. So yes, we want to share it, and we don't need to make money on the content. But if you feel, if I get the help of these guys to get this going in my company, this is our purpose. This is why we wake up in the morning. So please get us on board. We would love to. Yeah, thanks for asking.
Right. Then we have some feedback which we want to ask you. Let me stop sharing and do a Zoom poll. Yes. Question 1. I'm launching the poll as we speak. if we would do this more often, which format should we use? A webinar, a mini workshop online, a meetup, one-day workshop, or others? And if you have others, please make the suggestion in the chat.
I want multiples.
I know. Focus. Choices.
What would be most valuable to you?
That's actually feedback about how we asked the question. The book. Nice.
But this helps my personality type. Telling others there's a book coming helps others to voice it to me and me to keep focus. Okay, yes. Yeah. There's so many wonderful stuff to do out there in the world. Focus. Yeah, the book.
Yeah. Right. Let's end the poll and share the result. So 71% says a mini workshop online. That's nice. And 29% a meetup. Okay, thank you. No, and Paul. Let's start with the second question that we have. The second question is, what should we change for the next webinar? More cases, more theory, all elements of the courses, of one course, others.
Ciao, Sjoerd.
I should.
And we should evaluate it all if we liked the webinar format, Serjan.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Ooh, some others coming. Awesome.
Yay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. That's okay. Nice one.
We did that at XP 2020, or well, we did a very small version of that, but that inspired us also to do this webinar. But thanks.
We can do it again. Yeah.
I did like that one better, Serjan.
Yeah, me too. But I like this as well. It's not a competition.
Cool. It's cool experience. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The last question. If this would be a paid webinar, how much would you pay for the knowledge gained? 0, 10 to 50 euros, 100 to 200, other. Please suggest in the chat.
Oh, nice. So between 1500, you have to pick other. Nice design of the poll.
Yes, that was that is on purpose.
That's how I know you.
Yeah.
I would love to do a mashup, so the XP interactive workshop self-organization game part with more theory in between. Yeah,
true. Right. Well, this was our part. So, oh, did I stop the poll? Stop share results. Yes. All right. We have a group picture coming up. Do we want to do a group picture? Kaushal is...
Well, I think Kaushal is in a wonderful position for a group picture. Let me join you. All right, say smiles, Arjan.
Smiles, Arjan.
Oh, thanks for making it awkward and not saying when. Yeah.
Oh, when?
All right.
Yeah. We actually still have five more minutes.
Yeah, let's please unmute people and let them ask questions if they want.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm a fan of the webinar format, Sayan. we have wonderful control of the time for the first time in my life.
For the first time
but
ever.
I'm not sure about this.
This feels a little like the Thai boxing in Zoom. Is when you go and have breakout rooms and you set it to 5 minutes and everybody is back within 5 minutes. It's facilitation is amazing, but it just doesn't feel right.
I think it's okay to to explain the whole idea, but my choice for next time would be really to do something about co-creation, like pick a little case or something and then design that event and talk through what we designed there and stuff like that. That would be super cool.
Yeah, I think
see some
Theo agrees
nodding
with that as well.
I see some nodding around, so that's yeah. We did something comparable to what you say at XP 2020 conference. So that was fully interactive, people designing some boxes and boxes, us reflecting on the choices that were made there and how they relate to our experience. We even had a self-organization game digitally in there, or virtually I should say, in there. So we had that end of the spectrum and we had this end of the spectrum. I think a hybrid would be I would like a hybrid better, at least.
Yeah, I think as well. Because what we let me stop sharing.
Thanks for the feedback, by the way.
Yeah, what we noticed that the workshop that we gave at XP 2020, it was more or less that. All right, everybody is now doing on the whole process. They are experiencing themselves, but still there's little theory missing. The context of it all. So that's why we tried this webinar.
Yeah.
And
so I think there needs to be something like a webinar in the beginning. You need to explain it first. Maybe it should be like a series of events.
Yeah, that's actually a very good one, because Jordan and I were discussing about, okay, what do we do after this webinar, and actually this could be like a basic webinar, and if you have joined the first webinar, then you get invited for the second webinar where we go in depth and do a more workshop kind of thing. Then at least everybody has the same level, and we will start with setting the stage. Then.
Nice. Cool. Other questions that popped up that were not addressed during, or other things you want to share?
Bloody hot in here. So.
Yeah, it is, right? And you just performed the workshop. You can see.
Yeah. So, when do we get the certificates?
You know me so well, Daniel.
Yeah, Jordan is not about certificates, but I am. I will make sure you will get a certificate. Yeah.
In PowerPoint or not?
He is indeed.
No, it's actually more sophisticated. It's made in Illustrator, Adobe Illustrator. It's not just a PowerPoint thingy.
It would be cool. Like Daniel is certified self-organized. Then I can show that to my boss then.
Yes. Someone gave me the autonomy to be autonomous.
Yeah, I'm now just wondering how it would be at home if I showed it to my wife. I'm a certified self-organizer. Yeah.
This is the only, next to being able to tie my shoelaces, I think this is the only one I ever got in my life.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a nice gathering just to also see a lot of other practices from other companies to gather information, right? And you said it already with that guideline or model, how do you want to call it? You can create a, it's an old word, but you can, it's just like a cookbook, right? You are doing a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And with a lot of ingredients, with different kind of knowledge from different kind of countries, you can make a very good cookbook. And I love the way of thinking for sharing is caring. So if there is something that I can add in this whole, I will be ready also to give you some more insights.
Thank you.
That's nice, Kajan. Great.
All right, it's 6 o'clock. Let's give people their evenings so they can die in the heat outside.
Yeah.
Or enjoy.
Oh, yeah, enjoy. Yes, of course. That's what
enjoy. Yeah.
Thank you for setting up this stage, and talk to you later.
All right. Thanks for joining and staying till the end, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.